Welcome to this special episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations, which is part of our annual Australia's 50 Most Innovative Manufacturers campaign. This time around, the 50 Most Innovative has been made possible through the support of these wonderful sponsors: Australia-wide engineering recruitment, TXM Lean Solutions, the Industry Capability Network, Bonfiglioli Australia, the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, and the Smartcrete CRC. If you're interested in nominating, please see a link in the episode details. It's completely free to be a part of this campaign and always will be, and we'll be celebrating the announcement of the 50 Most Innovative list and the award winners at a special breakfast event on May 7 at Crown Melbourne during Australian Manufacturing Week. Now on with the show. Dr Chris Jeffery, thank you very much for joining us here on AU Manufacturing Conversations. It's a pleasure to finally have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get started in standard fashion, and that is with the standard opening question, and that is, of course, how did you get here and what do you make?
Simple question, long answer. I'm a third-time founder. Today, I'm the CEO of Convergence Medical, and we make the world's first and only arthroscopic surgical robot. We do a bunch of other things in there. And building a robot has many parts, and hence there's a lot of secondary markets that we also are able to service. The robot itself is in a pre-clinical phase. So whilst we're manufacturing, the platform is not yet delivered to hospitals around the world, but we are in our third generation. So we do have our established manufacturing supply chain and do a bunch there. Not sure if you want me to go into any further detail.
Well, you've got what I'd consider a pretty interesting career. We've spoken before, and I was fascinated about the transition from engineer graduate to working in overseas on deployment to pivoting to surgery and robotics and everything else. So let us have it.
Okay, so I started my career studying electrical and computer engineering at QUT. I had a real focus for robotics. I think I tell myself from memory, I think I went and became an engineer because I thought Iron Man was cool. And obviously robots are also cool. So what a fun, interesting field to study in. So I studied at QUT. I originally was fortunate enough to get supported under a sports scholarship, playing rugby league. But, it's a pretty difficult task to be expected to maintain like a GPA of 6 and go to rugby training 5 nights a week and play 2 games on the weekend. So via the first semester, I was trying to see how I could stop myself burning out and kind of meet my academic commitments. So I transitioned from that sports scholarship into a military scholarship, which is what led me into the Army. So following engineering from memory's getting fuzzy in my older age, I graduated around 2007. And following that, I went and was trained as an Army officer. I was in the Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineering Corp, and I was sent to Darwin to work out the very prestigious 101 field workshops where we oversaw, maintained the armoured vehicle fleet for the Australian Army. I was very, motivated young professional and was committed to do a good job. And I think the Army rewards those kind of, positive personality traits the way that they think is a good reward. And that is a deployment. So in 2008 through to 2009, I was given the honour and privilege to deploy to the Middle East, both in the Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns. Originally in Iraq as we were pulling out, and then over through to Afghanistan as we began the occupation and started building hospitals and the like. Whilst I was over there, I was what's called the adjutant. So on paper, second in charge. Realistically, everyone's little slave. But I had to, one of my core roles was to, coordinate and kind of run the lives of our important people. And in the Oruzgan province, our kind of really important assets were our surgeons. So we were building hospitals, there was lots of mines getting cleared, and there was lots of civilian and military casualties. So we frequently would fly in reserve officers that were trained orthopaedic general surgeons and alike. And a lot of what I did over there was to run their day by day, get them to where they need to go and so on. It was from that experience that I fell in love with medicine. If you think robots are cool, shiny surgical devices that save people and change lives are even cooler. So over that period of 9 months where there was really nothing else to do. I think I slowly, more so, fell in love with medicine. I started studying for the medical entry tests for the GAMSAT, and then I was ready to go. So I returned in 2009, sat the GAMSAT, and then was fortunate enough to get a position at the University of Queensland. Came over to the University of Queensland, started medicine. Another probably, I guess, fortunate for my career, not so fortunate for the Queensland government, but a notable event occurred, and that was Queensland Health had the issues with that payroll scandal. There was lots of issues with liabilities and insolvency. And once again, I haven't looked at the facts, but it was presented to us as little students as the risk of, I guess, bankruptcy or economic failure of the Queensland health medical sector. All sounds very ominous, but it worked out in the end. But as a reflex to that issue, the University of Queensland and the Queensland government created what is marketed as an MBA focused on healthcare. They call it the Medical Leadership Program. And to launch that program, they chose 5 junior doctors, so they were interns at the time, and med students that they thought had the most promise to be the leaders of the future. So I was one of them. A couple of my other past employees were others, and we were given the opportunity to concurrently study whilst doing medicine. We were also studying the business of healthcare, learning about the business models of the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and really how the system works, its pros and its cons. I guess that's relevant for where we end up. So I continued on, got to the end of my degrees and graduated, and then you go off and become an intern. We have to do in our first year as a doctor multiple different rotations to kind of demonstrate that we're competent in all areas of healthcare. And the one relevant to this story is I did a rotation in ENT surgery, so ear, nose and throat surgery at the Ipswich hospital. And in that, I guess, term, I was doing this pediatric clinic, which were little kids, normally less than 5 years old. And the majority of problems were if they had hearing issues due to chronic ear infections. There's a bunch of really ominous and scary things that it can be. And when you see those kids, you have to exclude that. And the way we needed to do that exclusion is through a hearing test. But why this led to, I guess, my business future was, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on our perspective, Ipswich Hospital just didn't have enough audiologists, which are tertiary trained professionals that do the Can You Hear the Beat style tests, their audiograms. So I was very frustrated because we had all these inefficiencies. And as we've discussed, I had an engineering background, so I had some technical insights, a clinical background that understood the importance of treating these patients correctly and quickly. And I just studied the business of healthcare. So this failure was really, I guess, a personal conviction to me at the time. I went home early one night, overly focused and frustrated about this problem of not having audiograms. And I was thinking to myself, how hard is it really to do a beat test? Surely I could write a computer program to do that. And I guess that was enough to get me to pull one of my old textbooks off the shelf, the HCL textbook, and program up some firmware over a very common Bluetooth chip called the Qualcomm Bluetooth chip. And I made some headphones that could autonomously do that test. So seems like it was the next day in my memories, but I'm sure it was a few weeks later. I brought this smashed together prototype to the NT ward and showed that we potentially had a solution. And I think it was probably just right time, right place, due to the background, due to all the investment from Queensland Health UQ in the transforming businesses and addressing problems, due to the significant clinical need, the fact that we really were having issues with this clinic and this service at Ipswich, that really sparked what ended up becoming my business career. So I continue.
And that turned into Audera.
Yeah. So that innovation, I guess, without knowing, I created a medical device. And whilst I do that frequently now, and it's a normal place, medical devices for a first-time founder or a kid that wasn't even intentionally creating a business are quite complicated and quite intimidating. So that technology eventually became Audera. Once it became clear that there was this medical device obligation, once again, right time, right place, that was 2014, and Beats had just been bought by Apple, I think. I can't remember who bought them now. And everyone was talking about headphones. So at that time, I was like, headphones clearly are a valuable market, but there's really no innovation. So to try to support the company to grow, to get to a place where eventually it would have the resources to become a medical device, I decided to pivot that technology into consumer electronics. And I made headphones that learn how you hear and give you personalized sound. You put them on, they gave you that hearing test, the one they created to do that diagnosis. And then it saves that model in the headphones and corrects the sound for you personally as you listen to music barefoot. And that's what became Audera.
I'm not sure how much time we want to budget for the rest of it, but we can just skim over field orthopaedics if you want to just say that for context's sake.
So following on that, from probably the most transformational experience in my life, I was given the opportunity to start my second company, which became Field Orthopaedics. When Audera, I guess, was growing, my orthopaedics friends, mentors, colleagues, and peers frequently would discuss with me, why am I focusing on this other area of healthcare when there are big insurmountable issues with orthopaedics, the specialty that I love and I'm really passionate about. I said to them, like I say to everyone, medical devices need a lot of support, a lot of funding, and a lot of time. And I guess fortunate for the outcome of this story, unlike audiology, which is like a peripheral allied health service, orthopedics is big business when it comes to medical devices, and it's dominated by big global investment funds. So I was given funding to start Field, and I ran that for 7 years as the CEO, 7 and a bit. Over that time, we designed, developed, and launched over 2,000 different products, different SKUs, grew into over 40 countries around the world, including something like over 40 states in America as well, which was our major market. We had 3 big regulatory submissions. Some of them got blended together along the journey, and they were in all kinds of regions, from the FDA in America to the CE in European regions and TGA, obviously, in Australia. That company was commercially taken over by Medartis in 2022, and that gave me the first time really in my professional life to take a step back, have a breath, and think about what I really wanted to do. And the outcome of that was Convergence.
Right. It's probably a good time to ask you about if you've had a sabbatical between those two and what you did in the interim and why you settled on arthroscopic robots.
Yeah, so I was given the opportunity to take a sabbatical, and that was probably the most fortunate experience of my life. I'm 39 this year. And up until 2022, I think I described my life as following the bright, bouncy, shiny ball. Most of my career, I've been an R&D engineer or a doctor who's doing research related to R&D engineering. So I've been jumping one project to the other, looking at what just is compelling at the time, more so than the bigger picture. So the sabbatical really allowed me to think what I wanted to do in the next chapter of my life. I love growing companies. I love medical innovation, but it's a big task. It takes a toll. There's no commitment that I'm aware of that is more demanding than creating and growing a new company in the medical sector. So realistically, I wanted to look at every other possible option before that. But realistically, I think I'm a bad employee. I'm very passionate when I get a vision, and I commonly move fast and with purpose. So I looked at research, probably not for me in the current academic setting, my current state of my life. I looked at being an executive for other companies, but that ownership and kind of responsibility is very fulfilling for me, which I didn't think I'd get there. Obviously thought about medicine, but it's exhausting, and I think there's a lot more value that can be brought outside of medicine, innovating the way it currently works. And that's what got me looking at a company all over again.
This is a short interlude to again thank the sponsors that are making 2025's 50 Most Innovative campaign possible. Our appreciation goes out to these legends: Australia-wide engineering recruitment, TXM Lean Solutions, the Industry Capability Network, Bonfiglioli Australia, the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, and the Smart Crete CRC. Now back to the show. Do you think you're, as a personality, predisposed towards seeing a problem and thinking, well, I can't think about anything else until that's taken care of, so let's get stuck in?
I mean, my life is set up to do that, right? So, yeah, it's probably not every problem. There's lots of things that I probably come across every day that are not compelling, and hence I wouldn't think a second about them. But Convergence, where, building a world's first product to help over 50 million patients a year in the industry that I'm most passionate about, using the solutions that I am most excited about. So, yeah, I couldn't think of anything that could get my attention more.
So, big, meaty, important problems. Tell me what the big, meaty, important problem was with Convergence that you thought, let's get stuck into that and build a business and some products around that, and take it away.
The most important thing when starting a company is not to have a solution and then try to squeeze it into a box where a problem might exist. The best thing is to find your way to naturally connect or be exposed to a true problem where you can understand and relate to the people who are suffering, and then work through why it exists, how it exists, what the impacts are, and try to take the least burdensome approach to making it go away. So with Convergence, realistically, after I made the decision of going back and looking at a business, the next question is, well, what business should that be? As I've alluded to, what I'm super passionate about is orthopaedics. And realistically, within the realm of orthopaedics, which is bone and joint surgery, there's three main areas. There's arthroplasty, which is joint replacements, so knee replacements, hip replacements. That's a big mature market, and I think we do quite well there. Always room to improve, but we do well, so not relevant. Then there's trauma. The trauma areas like broken bones and stuff like that we need to fix. That was really what field orthopaedics did and the solutions it's provided. And then the other major area is what we call arthroscopy, or minimally invasive joint surgery. It's commonly used for sports-related injuries like ACLs or ACL reconstruction for meniscal repairs, so on, or degenerative injuries like falling down stairs and tearing some tendons. So when I was looking at the problem that I wanted to look at, arthroscopy really stood out. This industry really started around the 1950s, and not much innovation has been provided since then. It's a big market. Over 50 million patients are treated this way every year, and it has large unaddressed issues with capabilities, issues with the cognitive distraction. The average surgeon does between 8 to 12 operations a day, and 1 in 10 operations, something breaks. And so, it's really, really plagued with problems. So that stood out. And then I guess the next part of the chapter was, how can I look to make that better?
I was just going to ask you to get stuck into some of that, how the solution looks, how you put it together, that kind of thing, what the robot is.
When I was looking at how to make it better, really, when I pulled apart the issues with arthroscopy, it was due to the fact we used a bunch of outdated equipment that's manually controlled, that's disconnected, doesn't talk with each other, and kind of fights with each other during the operations. In addition to it's old, it's unreliable and breaks, and all of these issues are pushed onto the surgeon, creating fatigue and distraction and so on. The obvious issues due to that background is you just don't have enough precision, you don't have enough dexterity, and hence you make mistakes. So when you look at that as a whole, that screams to me, well, integrated, complex system, mechanized, robotic actuation of the instrument. So long story short, and I'm cautious of time, but unpacking the problem of Convergence really screamed to me that we could address the 50 plus years of lack of innovation by creating a new platform to allow us to do what we already know we should be doing. And that platform was a surgical robot. That platform became the VO1, which is, once again, the world's first arthroscopic surgical robot.
Right. Tell me about the moving parts to VO1.
So the VO1 replaces around 5 to 8 legacy pieces of equipment. So in minimally invasive surgery, we obviously need a camera. It's keyhole camera surgery after all, to look inside and see the joint. We need to fill the joint with fluid so we have space to move around. We also use that fluid to keep it cool. The cartilage is very vulnerable to high temperatures. So we need a fluid management system that's smart and can do additional things. We obviously need to take that fluid out because it will be full of waste products. So we need a waste management system. And then we need instruments and the things that support those instruments to do the operation. Surgical devices and then electrosurgical power to power those devices and cutting tools and so on to trim up scar tissue, et cetera, et cetera. So within the VO1, we've brought all of those things together. The surgical robot possesses all of that capability. It's a 1.8 meter tall robot. There's 2 configurations that can reach between 1.7 to 2.2 meters. It can get anywhere it needs to in the operating room. And from the boom, it has up to 5 robot arms that can drop down so the surgeon can stay at the bedside and work around the robot without being interfered with and can use the robot to address the patient. And then obviously you need additional equipment to give you those 5 to 8 different capabilities. So connected with that robot, we also have a bedside cart, which does a bunch of the high performance processing. And we have a user console. So whilst the surgeons can control the robot by using a controller at the end of the robot arms, they can also step away and control via the user console, which gives them additional precision and deep immersion to what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you could tell me, please, a little bit about the supply chain for the VO1. You've got lots of, motors and wires and boxes and cameras and scalpels. How do you put it together and where does everything come from?
Yeah. So to make medical devices reliable, the company really needs to understand and produce everything that it's exposed to. Within the VO1 portfolio or the system, there's 30 SKUs, so 30, individual devices. Of that, 3 are big pieces of equipment, the robot, the bedside cart, and the user console, and the rest are single-use consumables. Within those big pieces of equipment, there's actually 2,000 components that make up sub-assemblies and assemblies. So obviously the supply chain is extremely complex. We've designed and developed the system to be vertically integrated because there's a lot of price pressures in the arthroscopic market. So we wanted to make as much as we can to lower the price of the equipment to as low as possible. So we didn't have to make hospitals pay for the surgical robots. So we, once again, a bit confidentiality there, so I won't say the specific prices, but we, through vertical integration, starting at motor level and building up, we've been able to reduce the cost of the platform so we can consign it to hospitals under usage agreements, saves them anywhere between $250,000 to $2 million up front. And then they just use that with those sterile single-use consumables, drapes, fluid tubes, instruments for each operation. And that's what they pay for. So the supply chain is super complex, but happy to go into it if you want.
Probably a level of complexity that's sufficient for this conversation. I mean, I'm probably just going to get confused and maybe the listener will. So you obviously had some exciting news earlier this year to do with a $5 million Series A round. Tell me what that supports.
Yeah, so the 5 mil funds our go-to-market. So this is our 4th fundraising activity. It's 5 mil USD. We're very proud and excited to be supported by a New York-based venture capital firm that specializes in surgical robotics. We feel we've got good company. That investment allows us to really establish the remainder of our commercial manufacturing processes, build our first article for validation of those processes, and then delivering that to our first clinical site. So it's a soft launch fundamentally. And yeah, we're excited to see how it goes.
And I believe that the tape was not running when you mentioned some of the stuff leading up to and beyond the soft launch, some timeline type details. I think that'd probably be interesting to, if I can make you recall them, to go into now.
So yeah, a very busy year for us. The soft launch really covers a few bits of core work. In April this year, we deliver our Generation 3 robot. This is a progression from what we delivered in 2023, which was issued a breakthrough designation by the FDA, as it already, even in the early form, was meaningfully and significantly better than the standard of care. Our Generation 3 robot is delivered April 30. We're demonstrating the capabilities of this milestone by allowing a US delegation of surgeons to do a simulated clinical demo. They're going to do a rotator cuff operation to see how it works and put it through its paces. And then from there, we plan to consolidate that feedback as well as a few additional things that we're already aware of to do our final design change and release our Generation 4 manufacturing file and instructions to make our clinical platform. Our Gen 4 is released in November, or we plan to release it in November, and that is our clinical robot. It's going to have all the specifications required to meet the needs of commercial and clinical use. From there, we have some final transfer related tests, so validation of our manufacturing processes, some transportation testing, some cleaning and stuff like that. And that closes out what's called the technical file. It allows us to finish our preclinical discussions with the FDA and will lead to our FDA clearance either late this year or early next. Those two big company milestones will trigger our next investment milestone. Whilst it might sound crazy, the fact that we've just closed round A, but we're already planning our round B. So the delivery of that clinical robot and then that closeout with the FDA is our trigger to open up our Series B. And that Series B is to support really the scaling of our commercial use. Once again, still some time away. Many things can change, but it should support growing our robots to around 30 or so in market. That will generate close to 30 million of annual recurring revenue. And we feel if we can demonstrate those technical and organizational accomplishments and that revenue growth, we should be in a position to support a public listing. So our round B could be, and at this stage is expected to be, our pre-IPO round. And we'll see how we go.
You certainly seem to be moving quickly, and I wanted to ask as a next question, if you have, I guess secret is probably the wrong word because I hate the word personally, and I think that there are no secrets. There's just kind of hard work and good planning and competence. But if you will, is there a sort of secret or perhaps more accurately a guiding philosophy that's enabled you to move so quickly?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head with your comments there. So we move fast, but I think we just follow good principles that everyone is probably taught if they've done business or a technical education, which is one, planning prevents poor performance. So I'm obsessive about planning. We plan down to the lowest form of detail, etc. However, my second philosophy is to understand a plan is only relevant before you get punched in the face, that famous Mike Tyson quote. So I'm a big believer that when you're creating those plans, you also need to ensure that you've got buy-in from the partners and the team members that are going to support those plans. They're deeply involved in that process. But we do that not just to feel good. We do that so we have personal conviction and understanding of why we said we do what we're going to do and what that means to the bigger picture. So the second layer is to ensure that you have processes and checkpoints to measure, monitor, and react to those changes. I have quite a formal operational structure. We have all the normal routine meetings, but it's all about ownership and providing people data-driven decision-making to understand what's changing so we can react accordingly. That's the second. The third is, you build a culture with people that are passionate and you give them the tools to do what they need to do. I'm a technical founder, so I try to lead from the front, throw myself into the pile of work and through blood, sweat and tears, deliver outcomes for the business. And I guess I'm fortunate enough and Convergence is lucky enough that has attracted people that share those same principles. And with the culture we've just got a highly motivated, highly committed team that's following the plan, reacting to the changes and giving it their all to do what we need to do.
As a founder, you have to be very hands-on at the start, and then obviously as you achieve a certain degree of scale, it becomes impossible. But at the early stages, what are you look for, if I can ask, in the people who are going to join your team and who, are going to be a part of the right culture that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, it's different at the different stages of company maturity, of course. But realistically, my recruitment process follows some high level principles. So I believe in alignment and clarity in communication. So when we advertise jobs, or if I'm involved, I'm not involved so much these days in the recruiting. Our teams are now taking over, which I'm very grateful for. But I try to clearly outline what they're going to do and what that means. And the pros and the cons are equally included in the job description to give us expectations. So it starts with clarity. That normally leads to an overwhelming amount of applicants. So after that, I look to ensure that there's some kind of commitment. So you're not just getting people that don't really want to be there clicking on something just as one of the 100,000 ads that they've clicked on. So normally there'll be some kind of task. Typically, I've issued some questions and asked them to give a formal written or an essay style response. Whilst that's important, you get to know them and it helps structure the interview. It's also I find a great screening tool because people really aren't interested, don't take the time to give you a written response. So that gets out a bunch. Then in the interview, once again, it's getting to know them, understanding it's all there. I find that anyone can look good in an interview. Realistically, anyone can probably still have a good interaction for 12 months, and the bad actors, the malicious traits only turn up well after recruitment. But I believe in the interview stage, I normally ask a couple of standard questions. Why do they want to be here? What made them choose a startup, which is going to take a toll on their life and be so extremely stressful and draining and be poor remuneration? Why would you want to do that over something else? And then realistically, I get them to defend their bad habits. I get them to put forward, the standard reverse questions. Why do you think you're not suitable for this role? What are the things about the company that, I guess, give you the ick? And why are you still, despite all of that, here today applying for the position? So that's that. And, I guess that kind of journey and process of discovery, just kind of, you find your people.
I almost feel tempted to ask, does everyone say as a bad habit, oh, I guess I just work too hard, or I guess I just care too much about a job, that kind of response?
Yeah, I mean, for people that know me, they'll probably say what I'm about to tell you, but I deeply consider and have layers of detail to everything that I do. Those things do come up. So, there's obviously following questions. You work too hard. Well, let's explain that. Tell me the most recent time when you believe you've worked too hard on a project or in a role. Tell me how that negatively impacted you in a way that you would identify that as something that is a bad trait. And then even though those negative impacts appeared, why did you still choose? Did you still choose? And if so, why did you still choose to continue that level of work? Let's explore that. So, anyone can give you a superficial answer. I find as you unpack the detail, that's where you really get to see if it's true.
We have some standard questions for this series and for our podcast, and one of them is to do with our current Australia's 50 most innovative, which Convergence was good enough to be a part of this year. The question is, what makes a company innovative? There are lots of businesses you might say are more innovative as a rule than others, some that aren't innovative, some that are somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. It's an arbitrary sort of thing to say, innovative, non-innovative. What to you makes an innovative company?
Maybe I just give you some of my background positions. So firstly, I don't think every company needs to be innovative, or at least they don't need to demonstrate product innovation. Companies all need to demonstrate competence and domain expertise and have a model that works. But innovation is only needed for a lesser section of all of companies. But they're the companies I love to run, so we can have a good chat about it. My second position is I think innovation manifests when a couple of things can occur. I think it's when you can gather, align, and kind of consolidate those problem owners, the people that face these issues every day. So you need to get them, you need to somehow create a voice and to get conviction and to get buy-in to what you're doing. So you need that. And then you need people that have the technical expertise to create a solution. So innovation occurs when you have those problem solvers and those solution makers mixed up together and given the support by structure and resources to make that solution appear. So what makes a company innovative? So once again, there's definitely times when I have been unnecessarily innovative or I've pushed innovation too far, and it can impact businesses, it can increase costs, it can make manufacturing more complex. But I think what makes a company innovative is realistically when they understand their purpose, they have a focus, and that solution of what they do lends itself to needing innovation. And then the company through brand or relationships can connect those product owners and build the team within the organization, which has the appropriate expertise to make those solutions a reality. So anyway, structure, process, and reason, I guess, is probably the short answer.
And what's your position on juggling risk and reward, and how do you understand that in the companies you run?
Yeah, so I think that's the great segue. I'm an R&D engineer, I guess, by personality or identity. So I often have to catch myself and check myself if I'm being too innovative or I'm pushing the envelope too far. When we get given problems, I try to really hold back to as late as possible before we commit to a solution. I like to, once again, understand the market and the user and the requirements. From there, think about what are the narratives, what are the stories of what we're trying to deliver in the highest, most general way possible, and then think of all the options to get there. Unfortunately, very often I'll get excited and be a super sexy technical solution and can't help myself and would jump ahead. And that's where the risks of innovation occur. So risk of innovation, obviously, it increases your project execution risk. It can cost more money, it can take more time, it can lead to more failures, it creates more unknowns. It can increase costs depending on what you're doing. And it can, I guess, move you away from what the customer understands. So explaining why you've done what you do can become more challenging or difficult. When I've over-innovated, I often find that the solutions or the products seem to be overly technical, overly complex, over-engineered. And so today, they're typically the catch points, but they're obviously the risk related to innovation. The rewards, obviously, if done well, is you get a disproportionate competitive advantage. You deliver new value to the customer and you can own or dominate or transform a market.
And the final question to ask you is the standard closer. We have a standard opener and a standard closer at the moment. And the standard closer is what's an issue within manufacturing that isn't, for whatever reason, getting the attention it deserves, in your opinion?
I mean, I think the world's rapidly changing and probably is so different today than what it was even a year ago. I think when I see this question, the state of the world and the state of manufacturing today, I think, is a little bit different, even if we had unprecedented commitment and infinite resources and attention. I think due to the very quick changing, massive changes that we're seeing, it would be impossible to stay on top of it. And the manufacturing sector, like all sectors, is rapidly transforming as a response. I think probably if I could give myself more attention, or if I could ask for something to be highlighted to give more support, probably in the state of the world in this moment, it's all about understanding these new opportunities and what they mean. I mean, BMW in North Carolina, for example, replaced all of their human workers with humanoid robots. Some of our other manufacturers are now making new materials and new methods. Sapphire lenses can now be injection molded, for example, massively lowering the cost of something that was really complex and hard to get before. So it's all about the world's a new place. And I think that creates new product opportunities, new economic opportunities. And really what we need to pay attention to is to understand what they are and how we can implement them. Obviously, there's a bunch of other standard things, such as we need more government support, more grant funding, more space, lower cost of utilities. But I think the bigger piece is just the way the world's changing and to get ahead of it.
Well, those are the ones, it's energy costs, the government, not giving the adequate support. They've been covered amply elsewhere, so appreciate the unique answer that you've brought to the table. And I also appreciate your time, which has run out for the purposes of this conversation, and it's been an absolute treat. So thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.